We're in week 5 of our chronological Bible study. This is the Bible we're using, the 1-year chronological study Bible. We started on January 1st. We're going to end on December 31st. And we're going through the Bible in chronological order rather than the order that the Bible is normally placed in. If you want to learn more about that, go back to video 00. That's going to be where you can find the information about all the precursor information that we have for this study. Alright, we're in the second half of Job. Last week's video, week 4, Job was afflicted by Satan. He had some well-meaning friends that came to try to comfort him, but they only added to Job's grief. Those friends were Zophar, Eliphaz, and Bildad. This week, there's a new guy on the scene. This guy's been sitting around listening and now chimes in. Now after Zophar, Eliphaz, and Bildad and Job have all said what was on their minds, now Elihu decides to chime in. Elihu is the son of Barachel the Buzite from the clan of Ram. If you remember back last week, we were talking about the difference between families, clans, tribes, and a nation. The nation of Israel is made up of 12 tribes. Inside each tribe are several clans, and then inside each clan are several families. Okay, so if you do it backwards, it makes more sense. So a family is the root of civilization. Mother, father, children, grandparents, right? And then several families make up a clan, and then those people are all related but not necessarily share the same name. Remember, I used the Hatfields as the example. You know, they didn't all have the same Hatfield name, but they were called the Hatfield clan here in America. And if you take several clans and you put them together, you have a tribe, such as the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Simeon, the tribe of Levi. And then if you take all the tribes and put them together, then you have the nation, a nation of Israel. A good example of this in our modern time is like the Iroquois nation. They are one nation made up of 6 different tribes, and they all have a council. They all come together, and they have one government that governs them, but it's made up of 6 different tribes. Each tribe is made up of clans, and then clans are made up of families. So Elihu, he comes from the clan of Ram. We also get kind of an idea of the time frame that we're in, because Genesis 22 verses 20 and 21 tell us, this is during Abraham's time. He says, soon after this, Abraham heard that Milcah, his brother, Nahor's wife, had borne Nahor 8 sons. The oldest was named Uz, or Uz. The next oldest was Buz, followed by Kemuel, and it says the ancestor of the Arameans. So if you remember on the last video, we were trying to find out exactly where Uz was. And we said there was some good evidence for Uz to be down here in the kingdom of Edom, because ancestry of the people questionably descended from Esau, which would have made them Edomites. But now Elihu chimes in, and he's from the clan of Ram. Ram is also known as Aram, and that's most definitely up here in Aram. And then this confirms it. It says the oldest name was Uz, right, which is the town that Job lives in, Uz. And it also says that they were the descendants of the Arameans. And this is the kingdom of Aram, where the Aramean people are. So we're thinking in this general area here is where ancient Uz was, where Job is residing during this time. And he's a very wealthy man. So we're going to pick back up in Job chapter 32, verse 1. Job's 3 friends, now this is speaking of Zophar, Eliphaz, and Bildad, 3 friends refused to reply further to him because he kept insisting on his innocence. Remember, Job is saying, I'm innocent. You keep saying that I'm receiving this affliction because I've done something wrong. I'm innocent, I tell you. Verse 2, then Elihu, the son of Barachel, the Buzite, of the clan of Ram, there we go again, in Job it's also confirmed there, he became angry. He was angry because Job refused to admit that he had sinned and that God was right in punishing him. He was also angry with Job's 3 friends for they made God appear to be wrong by their inability to answer Job's arguments. So now we have the young guy that thinks that he knows everything chiming in. But at least he acknowledges that he is young. Verse 4. Elihu had waited for the others to speak to Job because they were older than he, as was the custom, as is the custom or should be the custom today. But when he saw that they had no further reply, he spoke out angrily. Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite, said this, I am young and you are old, so I held back from telling you what I think. I thought those who are older should speak, for wisdom comes with age. But there is a spirit within people, the breath of the Almighty within them, that makes them intelligent. Verse 9. Sometimes the elders are not wise. Sometimes the aged do not understand justice. And that's sometimes true. Sometimes just because you're old doesn't mean that you're wise. There's plenty of unwise old people. But if you're seeking after God and you are living a godly life, you do grow more wise as you get older. With age also comes wisdom. Verse 10. So listen to me and let me tell you what I think. I've waited all this time, listening very carefully to your arguments, listening to you grope for words. I have listened, but not one of you has refuted Job or answered his arguments. So here we have young Elihu, young buck Elihu, getting ready to spill all this pin-up information he's been compiling and all these thoughts that he's had throughout this whole long discussion between Job and his three friends. In verse 33, keep silent and I will teach you wisdom. So Elihu goes a step further and says he's going to teach his elders. Chapter 34, verse 7, 8, and 9, he says, tell me, has there ever been a man like Job with this thirst for irreverent talk? He chooses evil people as companions. He spends his time with wicked men. He has even said, why waste time trying to please God? Now, if you remember the first chapter of Job, this isn't characterizing Job at all. God himself actually said, there's no other man like Job. There's no one like him. And that he is beyond reproach. So here Elihu is even like going further and he's mischaracterizing Job. Verse 10, he says, listen to me, you who have understanding. Everyone knows that God doesn't sin. The Almighty can do no wrong. He repays people according to their deeds. He treats people as they deserve. Truly God will not do wrong. The Almighty will not twist justice. Elihu hits on something that is pretty profound here. He says some true statements. He says he repays people according to their deeds. But then, yes, sometimes God does that. But God is also very, very, very patient and very, very faithful. And he also provides for us redemption. It's not always true that he pays people according to his deeds, because he sent Jesus Christ to make atonement for all of our sin. Verse 12, truly God will do no wrong. The Almighty will not twist justice. That is true. God can do no wrong, and he is just 100% of the time. So you see that Elihu has kind of a false perception of how God is, or at least he's presenting that, the character of God. He's presenting that in a way that is false. We're going down to verse 31. Why don't people say to God, I have sinned, but I will sin no more? Or I don't know what evil I have done. Tell me, if I have done wrong, I will stop at once. When Job actually said almost those same words. Verse 33. Must God tailor his justice to your demands? But you have rejected him. The choice is yours, not mine. Go ahead and share your wisdom with us. So he's mocking these older men, and he's mocking Job, and he's saying, well, if you're so wise, how am I so young that I can come up with all these answers that you can't? He talks about how powerful God is and how wise he is, and that we can't possibly understand him, which are all true. But again, like the other three friends that are there, Elihu he's saying some true statements mixed with some mischaracterizations. Elihu says down in chapter 36 verse 2, he says, let me go on and I will show you the truth. for I have not finished defending God. A lot of people have this misconception, Christians especially, when we're combating the arguments of secular society, that we have to defend God. We don't have to defend God. Yes, the meaning of apologetics is to give a defense, right? That's to give a defense of your faith. You're not defending God. There's no reason to defend God. God can defend himself. What you're doing is defending your faith. And through defending your faith, you are then expressing the truth of God's word, the truth of God's character to other people. So you don't need to defend God. And that's what Elihu self-admittedly says that he's doing here. Over in chapter 36, verse 19, he goes on, he says, so teach the rest of us what to say to God. We are too ignorant to make our own arguments. We cannot imagine the power of the Almighty, but even though he is just and righteous, he does not destroy us. So there, he does have some truth in there. He's right. Yeah. Even though we deserve destruction, he doesn't destroy us. So Elihu goes on this long rant, and he attacks Job specifically. And then chapter 38, and God shows up. Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. You'll see it in several times throughout the Bible. God is pictured in a whirlwind. Verse 2, who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorant words? This is God speaking. Brace yourself like a man, because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you know so much. Who determined its dimensions and stretched out the surveying line? What supports its foundations, and who laid its cornerstone? As the morning stars sang together, and all the angels shouted for joy. Who kept the sea inside its boundaries, as it burst from the womb? And as I clothed it with clouds, and I wrapped it in thick darkness, for I locked it behind barred gates, limiting its shores. I said, this far, and no further will you come. Here your proud waves must stop. So God is demonstrating his power at this point. And where were you, you who questions me, God Almighty, when I did all these things? Verse 12, have you ever commanded the morning to appear and caused the dawn to rise in the east? Have you made daylight spread to the ends of the earth to bring an end to the night's wickedness? As the light approaches, the earth takes shape like clay pressed beneath a seal. It is robed in brilliant colors. The light disturbs the wicked and stops the arm that is raised in violence. Have you explored the spring from which the seas come? Have you explored their depths? Do you know where the gates of death are located? Have you seen the gates of utter gloom? Do you realize the extent of the earth? Tell me about it if you know. See, God at this time knew about North America. He knew about the British Isles. He knew about Britain. He knew about Australia. These are all places that were probably unknown to the people in Job's area in Job's time. He's saying, you don't even know how big the earth is. You don't even know the extent of the earth. Verse 19, where does light come from, and where does darkness go? Can you take each one to its home? Do you know how to get there? But of course you know all this, for you were born before it was all created, and you are so very experienced. So this is God mocking Elihu and Job and the three friends. Have you visited the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of hail? I have reserved them as weapons for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war. Where is the path to the source of light? Where is the home of the east wind? Who created a channel for the torrents of rain? Who laid out the path for lightning? Who makes the rain fall on barren land in a desert where no one lives? Who sends rain to satisfy the parched ground and make the tender grass spring up? Does the rain have a father? Who gives birth to the dew? Who is the mother of the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens? From the water turns to ice as hard as rock, and the surface of the water freezes. Can you direct the movements of the stars, binding the cluster of the Pleiades or loosening the cords of Orion? Can you make the stars come together in a certain formation and stay in that formation, or separate? Can you do that? Can you direct the constellations through the seasons, or guide the bear with her cubs across the heavens? Speaking of the bear constellation. Do you know the laws of the universe? Can you use them to regulate the earth? Can you shout to the clouds and make it rain? Can you make lightning appear and cause it to strike as you direct? Who gives intuition to the heart an instinct to the mind. God's covered all of the things that he's done in creation. He's covered all of the things that he has the power to control, the things that he can do. Now he's moving to the heart of man and the mind of man. Who is wise enough to count all the clouds? Can you tilt the water jars of heaven when the parched ground is dry and the soil is hardened into clods? Can you stalk prey for a lioness and satisfy the young lion's appetites as they lie in their dens or crouch in the thicket, saying, I provide, and I've also put that into their DNA and their instinct to be able to do those things. Who provides food for the ravens when their young cry out to God and wander about in hunger? Chapter 39. Do you know when the wild goats give birth? So the wild goats that live up in the mountains and no one sees them. Do you know when they give birth? Have you watched as deer are born in the wild? Do you know how many months they carry their young? Are you aware of the time of their delivery? They crouch down to give birth to their young and deliver their offspring. Their young grow up in open fields and they leave home and never return. Who gives the wild donkey its freedom? Who untied its ropes? I have placed it in the wilderness. It is home. It is a wasteland. It hates the noise of the city and has no driver to shout at it. The mountains are its pasture land, where it searches for every blade of grass. Will the wild ox consent to being tamed? Will it spend the night in your stall? Can you hitch a wild ox to a plow? Will it plow a field for you? Given its strength, can you trust it? Can you leave and trust the ox to do your work? Can you rely on it to bring home your grain and deliver it to your threshing floor? The ostrich flaps her wings grandly, but they are no match for the feathers of the stork. She lays her eggs on top of the earth, letting them be warmed in the dust. She doesn't worry that her foot might crash them or a wild animal might destroy them. She is harsh toward her young, as if they were not her own. She doesn't care if they die, for God has deprived her of wisdom. He has given her no understanding. But whenever she jumps up to run, she passes the swiftest horse with its rider. Have you given the horse its strength, or clothed its neck with a flowing mane? Did you give it the ability to leap like a locust? Its majestic snorting is terrifying. It paws the earth and rejoices in its strength when it charges out to battle. It laughs at fear and is unafraid. It does not run from the sword. The arrows rattle against it, and the spear and the javelin flash. It paws the ground fiercely. It rushes forward into battle when the ram's horns blows. He's saying, look, I made all this stuff. All these things that you wouldn't do. They can do all these things that you wouldn't dare do. And they do that because I created them that way. Speaking of the horse, he says, it snorts at the sound of the horn. It senses the battle in the distance. It quivers at the captain's commands and the noise of battle. Is it your wisdom that makes the hawk soar and spread its wings towards the south? Is it at your command that the eagle rises to the heights to make its nest? It lives on the cliffs, making its home on a distant rocky crag. From there it hunts its prey, keeping watch with piercing eyes. Its young gulp down blood where there's a carcass, there you'll find it. Then the Lord said to Job, do you still want to argue with the Almighty? You are God's critic, but do you have the answers? Then Job replied to the Lord, humbled. Verse 4, I am nothing. How could I ever find the answers? I will cover my mouth with my hand. I have said too much already. I have nothing more to say. Now, if you remember back to the first part of Job, this was Job's attitude in the beginning. Job was a good man. He made sacrifices to God just in case his sons did something wrong at one of their get-togethers. He was a righteous man. And he already made this statement before. He said, I can't really say anything because if anything that I say will be unworthy. But when arguing with his friends who were saying that he had to do something wrong, in that argument of trying to prove his innocence to his friends, he's now started to question God. And this is God then rebuking Job for that. Chapter 40, verse 6. The Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. So remember, Job just said, I'm nothing. I have nothing more to say. Basically, he's like, I can't even say I'm sorry. I'm unworthy. I'm unworthy of your attention, God. I'm unworthy. And then the Lord goes on from the whirlwind. He says, brace yourself like a man because I have some questions for you. and you must answer them. Will you discredit my justice and condemn me just to prove you are right? Are you as strong as God? Can you thunder with a voice like his? All right, put on your glory and splendor, your honor and majesty. Give vent to your anger. Let it overflow against the proud. Humiliate the proud with a glance. Walk on the wicked where they stand. Bury them in the dust. Imprison them in the world of the dead. Then even I would praise you, for your own strength would save you. Take a look at Behemoth. Behemoth, an ancient creature. We don't really know exactly what. A lot of people think that Behemoth was like a Diplodocus or a Brontosaurus or something like that. Verse 15 says, take a look at Behemoth, which I made, just as I made you. It eats grass like an ox. See its powerful loins and the muscles of its belly. Its tail is as strong as a cedar. The sinews of its thighs are knit tightly together. Its bones are tubes of bronze. Its limbs are bars of iron. It is a prime example of God's handiwork, and only its creator can threaten it. It says nobody, no other animal, no other human can approach this Behemoth. Only God can threaten it. Verse 20, the mountains offer it their best food, where all the wild animals play. It lies underneath the lotus plants, hidden by the reeds in the marsh. The lotus plants give it shade among the willows beside the stream. It is not disturbed by the raging river, not concerned about the swelling. Jordan rushes around it. No one can catch it off guard, or put a ring in its nose and lead it away. Such was the custom with some oxen and cows. You can put a ring in their nose and lead them away because it's a tender spot. The Lord continues on, Job 41. Can you catch a leviathan with a hook or put a noose around its jaw? Leviathan also is some kind of gigantic sea creature. There's a name for it, but it's the big long one, looks like a big alligator with the teeth and all. That's what they theorized that it could be. The really gigantic one, not like the normal alligator size, like the gigantic alligator. Can you tie it with a rope through the nose or pierce its jaw with a spike? Will it beg you for mercy or implore you for pity? Will it agree to work for you, to be your slave for life? Can you make it a pet like a bird or give it to your little girls to play with? Will merchants try to buy it to sell it in their shops? Will its hide be hurt by spears or its head by a harpoon? If you lay a hand on it, you will certainly remember the battle that follows. You won't try that again. So God's saying again, he's like, I made this gigantic, magnificent, impregnable creature that you can't even hunt because it has so much armor. It is so powerful. I made that. I can kill it, God says. Verse 9. No, it is useless to try to capture it. The hunter who attempts it will be knocked down. And since no one dares to disturb it, who then can stand up to me? Who has given me anything that I need to pay back? Everything under heaven is mine, God says. Verse 12. I want to emphasize Leviathan's limbs and its enormous strength and graceful form. Who can strip off its hide? And who can penetrate its double layer of armor? Who can pry open its jaws, for its teeth are terrible. The scales on its back are like rows of shields tightly sealed together. They are so close together that no air can get between them. Each scale sticks tight to the next. They interlock and cannot be penetrated. When it sneezes, it flashes light. Its eyes are like the red of dawn. Some people say that this is where the tradition of dragons comes from, because when he sneezes, it flashes light, and he has impregnable armor with scales that are so tight that you can't get it between them. So we know the legends of dragons throughout civilizations on the earth, and a lot of people theorize this is where that comes from. Verse 19, speaking of the Leviathan, lightning leaps from its mouth, flames of fire flash out. Smoke streams from its nostrils like steam from a pot heated over burning rushes. Its breath would kindle coals, for flames shoot from its mouth. Sounds like a dragon, right? The tremendous strength in Leviathan's neck strikes terror wherever it goes. Its flesh is hard and firm and cannot be penetrated. Its heart is hard as rock, hard as a millstone. When it rises, the mighty are afraid. It goes on about the Leviathan in verse 33. Nothing on earth is its equal, no other creature so fearless. Of all the creatures, it is the proudest, it is the king of beasts. So God's demonstrating how powerful this creature is, how magnificent this creature is, but his main point is how magnificent is the God that created this thing, and how feeble people are, that they can't conquer this beast, that they can't compete with this beast physically, but God could wipe them out with a snap of his fingers. Chapter 42, Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do anything and no one can stop you. You asked, who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorance? It is I, and I was talking about things I knew nothing about. So Job is admitting he knew nothing about what he was talking about, even though he thought that he was a wise man. Things far too wonderful for me. You said, listen, and I will speak. I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. I have only heard about you before, but now I have seen you with my own eyes. This is Job saying, I have only heard about you before, but now I've seen you with my own eyes. I take back everything I said. I sit in dust and ashes to show my repentance. Job is showing how he's showing his humility, he's showing his repentance for the way that he said. And remember, all the way back in the beginning, he said, if I say anything, remember when his friends first started talking to him, he said, if I say anything, it'll be sinful. But then he was prodded into defending himself, and then he went into this whole monologue where he was questioning God and questioning his treatment by God. And now he's come full circle back to where he started, was this, I take back everything, I sit in dust and ashes to show my repentance, and I'm unworthy. After the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, speaking of Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, and your two friends, for you have not spoken accurately about me, as my servant Job has. So take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer a burnt offering for yourselves. So they're supposed to go get these sacrifices, take them to Job, and offer the offering for themselves. And then he says, my servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer on your behalf. This kind of mirrors what the Levites do later on. The people will bring the offering to God in God's temple or the tabernacle. There they are sacrificed by a Levite, by a Levitical priest, and then their sins are atoned for through this offering that they give. So then he says, I'll accept his prayer, not your prayer, Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. I'll accept Job's prayer on your behalf. I will not treat you as you deserve, for you have not spoken accurately about me, as my servant Job has. So he's showing, I'm going to extend grace to you. So Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite did as the Lord commanded them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. When Job prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes. In fact, the Lord gave him twice as much as before. And we're going to pause right there and kind of go back through the whole story before we get to this ending, right? This culmination of this whole story. So 1, Job was a righteous man. There was none like him, God stated. But God allowed Job's affliction. And because God allowed Job's affliction, Satan attacked Job. But it was only within the confines of what God would allow. First he said, don't touch him, don't affect his physical state. Then he allowed him to take his physical state. It was only within the limits of what God allowed. Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 5 says, you should know in your heart that as a man chastens his son, so the Lord your God chastens you. God is allowing these things to happen to him to make Job better. Although it's not an enjoyable time. It's not an enjoyable time for Job. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11, he says, "My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor detest his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as a father the son in whom he delights." Just as a father in the son whom he delights. So, why do parents discipline their children? It's not to express anger. It's not to abuse them. It's to correct behavior. To teach is why you discipline your children. You discipline to teach character. You're trying to teach your children character through the discipline. Okay, you're using discipline as the tool. And God, being the greatest father, is doing exactly that to Job, and he does exactly the same thing to you and I. New Testament, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 7, he says, "If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten?" You know, there's bad people in the world that do a lot of bad things, and it goes unpunished. Like, this isn't just. But then bad things happen to good people. This doesn't make sense to us. But it's because God is watching over you, less like he watched over Job. And he is chastening, he's disciplining, he's teaching those whom he cares for. Those that have rebelled against him, he may allow to go and live in accordance with the things that come along with their choices. 1. God allowed Job's affliction. 2. Satan attacked Job, but with the limits. 3. The three friends make general statements about God, but do not help Job. There are feeble attempts at helping. 4. Elihu shows up and openly turns on Job. And 5, at this point, God intervenes. He speaks to Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. Notice that Elihu wasn't addressed here. And remember, Elihu was the one that said that he was defending God. God don't need you to defend him. God is a good father. He cares for his own children. And he shows grace to the three friends. The three friends make sacrifices. Then Job prays for them for forgiveness. Job is restored, but changed. And this is the whole point of the thing. Job is restored in chapter 42, but he's not the same Job we had in chapter 1. In chapter 1, he had 7 sons, 3 daughters, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, which equals 1,000 oxen, by the way, and 500 female donkeys. He was known as the richest person in that entire area in chapter 1. Now, he's endured this trial. He's lost everything. His children have all died. His wife has said, "Curse God and die." His friends now have turned against him. He's afflicted physically with sores all over his body. And now he's gone through that whole trial, and God shows up and tells him, "Who are you to question me?" But because Job maintained his faith through that trial, Job is restored. The three friends that ridiculed Job, that mischaracterized God, they have to make a sacrifice. They have to make a sacrifice. Literally, they have to give up animals that are prized animals. They have to give them up to atone for the sins that they committed during that long conversation, which is the book of Job. But because Job kept his faith despite all these afflictions that I just listed, he gets back 7 more sons, gets back 3 daughters who are more beautiful than any other women around. He gets back twice as many sheep, so now 14,000 sheep. He gets back twice as many camels. He gets back twice as many oxen, so now he has 2,000 oxen. So 1,000 teams equals 2,000 oxen. And he gets back 1,000 female donkeys. So everything is twice as much as what he had before. Tradition holds that Job also lived twice as long in his second half of his life after his trial than he did in the first part of his life. So we know there at the end of the chapter that he lived for 140 years. Well, that means that Job was 70 years, which is half of 140. He was 70 years when that happened, when the trial came upon him, which makes him about 210 at his death, which is, for context, Abraham lived 175 years, Isaac lived 180 years, and Jacob lived 147 years, which might have been his contemporaries. So Job was actually rewarded with a very long life for that time. So what's the point of Job? We hit on it briefly. No one is immune to affliction in this world. Not even God-fearing, righteous people like Job. Job was a God-fearing, righteous person. Bad things happen to good people. In fact, they will happen. Bad things will happen. If you're a God-fearing person and not living in a time of trouble right now, it's because God is personally watching over you and protecting you, just like he was with Job. He's holding back the tide of trouble that can so easily overtake you, no matter what your situation in life is. It's how you respond to the affliction that he allows to happen that makes all the difference. You could turn your back on God in those times of affliction, but he won't turn his back on you. However, if you're like Job, you're reverent, God-fearing, you're obedient, you're humble, you're faithful. If you're all those things, if you endure your trials faithfully, like Job did, God will reward you in this life or the next. So, really, that's the whole point of Job. Job was a righteous man. He was a good person that had bad things happen to him. But in that affliction that God allowed, he did not turn his back on God. He remained faithful to God. He questioned God. He even started to feel sorry for himself. But he never lost faith. And that's the most important lesson we can learn from Job. And because of that, Job was rewarded. Next week, we're going to pick back up on our horizontal timeline in our horizontal books. And we're going to pick back up on moving forward in time in the book of Exodus. So remember that we've finished book of Genesis. Jacob and his 12 sons moved into Egypt. They lived in the land of Goshen. Joseph had died, and remember it said they would live there for 400 years. And after 4 generations they would come out. Well, we're about to read how that takes place 400 years later. So we'll see you next week. Enjoy your reading.